I also realized I forgot to record that entire thing. So Caitlin, Juliana, or Brianna, if one of you could email your presentation to me, I would really appreciate it, and I'll post it to Canvas. Okay, so I'm going to ask you all a few questions. So it doesn't, the person who presented what I'm going to ask about doesn't have to answer. This will be something that all three of you, just as you have been doing. So you mentioned structural family system ratings, and I'm just curious if you can talk a little bit more about like what that is. I'll be honest, it was the first time I had heard it, so I wasn't sure if perhaps this was the first time others had heard about it. So if you could share with us what it is, like what its utility, what is it rating?
Yeah, that was from one of the articles that I had came across related to just the diversity thing. And so what I gathered from it, it was just like an assessment tool kind of about like main players and things like that. And from there, like therapists need to just be aware of like different things that can influence that, such as like extended family members who are part of the system. If it is a blended family where there's a stepfather or something like that. So really taking into consideration like who is part of the structure and looking through that from a cultural sensitive lens.
Okay. Do you know if that's a formal assessment? Like, is it a piece of paper that is filled out?
I can look into that and then provide you more information on that one. I don't know off the top of my head.
No problem. Go ahead, Caitlin.
I had seen it also in one of my articles. They touched on it too as kind of like an adaptation. It does look like, when I'm looking at it right now, it does look like it's a rating scale. And it says a standardized procedure for eliciting family interaction consists of administration of 3 family tasks. The family's interactional patterns on the tasks are evaluated along 6 dimensions of structural functioning. So structure, flexibility, resonance, developmental stage, identified patienthood, and conflict resolution. And then there was a place where you could download it, but I wasn't able. It was like I could probably get it through Alliant Library, but I wasn't able to. But it does look like, it seems like it says evaluating therapy outcome.
Okay.
So it might be involved in like kind of the end of therapy too. So I don't know.
Do any of you know if that's been validated, like what populations it's been validated with?
I'm not 100% sure, but again, I can kind of take a more in-depth look about that.
Sure. The reason I ask is because, this can be helpful in assessment, right? But at the same time, we always want to be critical of assessments and questionnaires, always asking, who is this validated with? Who has this been used with? How are we gathering the evidence behind things? So I'll always encourage you to stay critical and open on that stuff. I like that theme that you brought up with that, Caitlin. So the reason I ask is just because recognizing that if this is a measure or a questionnaire, an assessment that has been created with, X population, X presenting issue, whatever it is, staying in the spirit of cultural concordance, of making sure that whatever you use, you're looking at it through a culturally sensitive lens, that it may not, that again, you may be pathologizing something that is normative and vice versa, or something like that. So just curious about any other information on that. You also mentioned the concept of conflict diffusion, as opposed to or different from conflict resolution. So if you could describe to the class, like, what would we be looking for? What is cultural diffusion, or I'm sorry, conflict? I don't know. I keep doing that. Conflict diffusion, as opposed to, and how is it different from conflict resolution?
Yeah, I think that was also something that I had come across in one of the articles. And so like, for me, my understanding
Sure.
of the difference is conflict resolution. That is something where the parties involved can come to some sort of like agreement or agree to disagree type of resolution where it's like there's an outcome to that. Like there's a resolution. However, with the conflict diffusion, to me, it's more so like
lessening the conflict.
yeah, like kind of avoiding it in a sense, where there's no resolution that really comes to it. It's just like situation happened and we're gonna kind of avoid what's going on instead of like addressing it with a resolution, is my understanding of it.
Sure. So Brianna, I think you bring up like a really good point in the way that you're explaining it right now is, so I would argue that largely our aim, our goal is conflict resolution, right? That all parties walk away with some kind of like acceptance of how we're going to move forward as a unit with this. And that there's like some, a pretty little bow, for lack of a better kind of term on this moving forward. And so what I'm understanding from conflict diffusion is that there may be differing perspectives on it, that there may be different approaches moving forward, or that there isn't necessarily something that that there's a clear path, and maybe not clear, but just like a path moving forward that every single person agrees that this is the answer to this. And so I say that because there may be the complete acceptance and like totally being okay with this conflict diffusion. Whereas as therapists, we may unintentionally be imposing, no, we all have to be on the same page. We need to resolve this conflict. So allowing space for the family to say, no, we're cool with like whatever we decided on this. We don't have to all move forward in the exact same path. I think that's what I'm understanding. So I just want to like highlight that sometimes, we do bring in an imposition in that and say, no, this is the right way to move through this, where you're not really meeting the family where they are. I don't remember who mentioned this, but this is potentially something that the whole class could participate in. There's this concept of establishing respect with all family members. And so I'm curious if anybody can like bring up an example or share an example of what that would look like. Like, how do you establish respect with each member of a family?
I think that was brought up more in the discussion. And so in my opinion, it would be a soft, well, actually the softer term would be joining and accommodating the family so that each one feels that they are very important in the family hierarchy. Even if today they're not calling the shots, they will be able tomorrow to be heard. And if their opinion logically flows and it's understood, then yes, it will give them the opportunity to, feel important. Just like Ponta said in the video, like, oh, you don't count, like, because he asked if his opinion is heard, and he said, oh, so you don't count his family, huh? And he said, yeah, I mean, no one listens to me. And so I think that's what the discussion was referring to, respect on, simply like accommodating each member to feel the importance of I count, I matter.
Okay. So I'm going to challenge you a little bit on that. And
Sure.
actually, Caitlin, do you want to add anything? I didn't know if I just saw a hand.
I was gonna
Oh, yeah.
go.
Go ahead, ladies.
I was just gonna add to, like, I think for me, again, my understanding, very similar to Juliana's, like that joining process where you're acknowledging, you're maybe even validating certain perspectives, and allowing each family member to be heard. So really creating that therapeutic alliance with each member.
I think I was gonna add, I also think the theory inherently like kind of requires some respect of just where the therapist is as like the expert, as a consultant. Right, it's not, they might not be able to keep that respect that long, but even just so like there's almost a mutual respect of like that's the therapist's role in the family, whereas like postmodern might be very different. But I think too, even like in terms of unbalancing, you really are playing with that fine line of the power that you have in the room and as a therapist, and like how, you know, to unbalance just enough to have some alignment without, you know, making others feel alienated. And yeah, it's like what Juliana said of the accommodating and the joining process and the mimesis of it, the tone and the language. And there was a cute part in the video where like the little girl is like really uncomfortable and he like asked her a question and she couldn't answer, and he was just like, I'm gonna ask your mom because I don't want to make you feel embarrassed. And it was like, even that, like even him respecting the little girl showed a level of, he was respecting everybody. And I feel like if I was a mom, I'd feel good that this therapist is respecting my daughter's feelings, which would give me a sense of feeling respected too, almost. So there's a couple different layers to the respect, I think.
Yeah, thank you for all of that. So I'll ask one more question because I want to be, you know, abide by and be respectful of your time. So this, I think, piggybacks a little bit off of Justine's question earlier of these potential oppressive narratives, maybe versus like a more of an empowerment stance. So one of the criticisms or critiques of structural family therapy is that of not necessarily allowing much space for these larger societal influences, right? So I think the term that was used was oppressive societal discourses. So given that, you know, we have some freedom to adapt, right? We're not taking the theory and just smacking it on families, is how would you potentially incorporate oppressive societal discourses into structural?
Narrative therapy is great at that, I think. And as we go into the subsystems, they're kind of narrating a little bit of what happens, and, you know, kind of like the invisible rules of what the family is actually functioning under. And so as we're asking, using structural to really uncover what is invisible, we can also allow for narrative therapy to kind of allow the client to narrate their part of the story kind of fully, and giving a larger space and holding space for whatever it is that they are going through while narrating the story. That's one way that I would think of. Or positive psychology or client-centered. I think they both can actually really work very well together with structural. And, you know, structural seems very directive, but it could also be very client-centered into giving importance and heavy weight to each member as they're speaking.
And this is a question open to the class too. So Caitlin or Brianna, if you have anything, great. But this is more of a, you know, how integration, incorporation. What are some thoughts of everybody in terms of how to incorporate these larger systemic influences into an approach that historically has really focused more on the family?
I think like even in the video, like she kind of breaks down and you can see that like the pressures of being a single mother of color is probably difficult for her. And so just even taking that bit and acknowledging, like kind of just validating like how hard it must be and how hard it probably is for women, or like even validating the spouse's position of immigrating and having to work, you know, or not being able to work, but like working at their table, and just kind of like really like kind of calling it what it is, and maybe bringing that language to them and acknowledging and validating can be a way. And then there's also like maybe a more operational way of like, I think sometimes we all kind of have that like social worker or case manager aspect in us that we're like, okay, well, do they need help with housing? Like, do we need to make sure they get all their benefits? Does he need help with his immigration lawyer? Like, there's also that part where we can actually take maybe a more active role in making sure, or like talking to our agency and like doing the advocacy work to make sure that they are getting support, which in turn valid or like acknowledges what they definitely have to work from. So maybe that's a way to do that.
Mhm. Solution focused also, I think, can really be integrated with this, because solution focused has that miracle question and the Socratic answering questioning. And if there is a resolution that, you know, the structural is trying to do. And if we plug in the solution focused postmodern idealisms and the theory approaches, and, you know, really merge them together, I think that the treatment can actually take a really good chunk of what both these theories can offer, and really offer a more altogether inclusive type of treatment.
I agree with you. And when you were talking about conflict diffusion before, I thought it sounded very similar to the solution-focused strategy of dissolving the problem.
Mhm. Yes.
I think one thing too that maybe not very structural specific, but still is, could possibly be the intervention of an enactment of bringing the past into the present in terms of acknowledging the discourses that they may not necessarily see as oppressive, but still acknowledging the narratives that are around it and bringing that into the room. And I also think in terms of that enactment with the therapist, by being able to express the vulnerability of kind of how what's happening to them emotionally in the room now, it can be experienced by all of the other members, because depending on the structure of the family, the reasons as to why they could or could not be vulnerable could be very uncomfortable for them, and they may not have been able to express it through, I guess, emotion before. Because, for example, in the video we had watched earlier, it was a lot about kind of action, or like, how do you say, like Caitlin was mentoring, oh, I'm a single mom, I'm this, and kind of just bringing, say, that scenario into the room in order for people to feel more as a system, rather than delegating or kind of separating their occupations, or I don't know how to say, but like emotional positioning, if that makes sense.
The question seems to imply that the family is homogenous in its experience of whatever social pressures there might be. And I might start with the notion, or start with a question, to try to assess, you know, how are the pressures, societal, racial, otherwise, economic, affecting each family member differently.
I think that would be a beautiful way to bring in the respecting of each individual as well, of allowing for each person to have their own, like, voice their own perspective on the same, you know, societal experience, potential same societal experience.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I appreciate that feedback, Marcy. It was very thorough and very detailed, and right on with the topic that we are discussing. I think that solution focus does also bring that in through, you know, just discussing where each member is kind of feeling and what they're sensing, maybe not leaving a lot of space for each one to process. But I noticed that he called it a counseling session. He didn't call it a therapeutic session. And so it would give me a little feeling of, I'm kind of coaching you guys. I'm kind of giving you this push that you all need. So that's where I think that when George was speaking about the patronizing, that's where probably that could hit the ear a little wrong, because it was a little quick and fast, and let's get these resolutions and let's work on them. And yeah, unfortunately, in those times, probably families were feeling absolutely distraught, and they needed this extra push. And now we're 60 years later, and things have changed, and so we're trying to adapt to those changes. So I feel that for the time that this video was taken in, it did it justice, in my opinion.
So let's go ahead and see your role play, so we get enough time to kind of comment on it, ask some questions.
Let's see. So this is our vignette. Juliana, did you want to read it? I think you had written it.
Sure. So the case that we are presenting is a mother who is 28 years old, and she has 2 children. She is recently welcomed in the house her new partner, and they've been together for 8 months, moved in 3 months ago. She has 2 children, as I mentioned. One is 12, and that's the boy, and the other one is 4, and she's the girl. The girl set the house on fire, playing with the brothers' chemistry experiment, and this is not the first time that it happened. So the couple came to therapy to seek help for what was going on, and to see if they could find a resolution, mentioning that the girl would be the identified patient, the 4-year-old.
We kind of took some inspiration from one of the Williams article vignettes and kind of did some stuff with it. Also, so where did my thing go? Sorry. Side note, when you are filming your Zoom, make sure that you change your settings so that it's not on gallery or on speaker view.
Yeah.
That's our one thing that we'd say. We apologize because you can't see all 3 of us at the same time. I didn't realize that until we had finished, and this is the best that we can do in the time allotted. But for everybody else going forward, just make sure you change your settings for recording so that you can see all 3 people. So I apologize in advance. Okay, so I'm gonna see.
There are 3 recordings. Each one of us takes turn, and
Yeah.
is the therapist. Would you guys prefer that we pause after each one and kind of go through what happened, or would you guys prefer that you watch all 3 and then we bring it back to the whole class as a discussion?
Let's watch all 3 and bring it back.
Okay, so we were really good on that 45 minutes and 43 seconds. So we were like not gonna add any more time. And then we try to label it. So this one, I believe, is Brianna's gonna be the therapist in the first, and it should say on there. So wish us luck. Let me know how the sound is.
Well, thank you all for coming back today. It's really good to see you. I know last time when we left off, we were talking a little bit about just the dynamic between everyone in the household. And I know that there's been
oh my gosh. Okay, hold on. Let me. Story of my life. Hold on. I had backup. I have it on YouTube. Okay. Please don't fail me.
Well, thank you all for coming back today. It's really good to see you. I know last time when we left off, we were talking a little bit about just the dynamic between everyone in the household. And I know that there's been a few incidences with Tamar and Mindy. And I know, Brandon, you've been kind of looking over them, and there's been incidences that have happened on your watch. which has led to some difficulties between you and Elizabeth as far as like discussing how to manage these issues. So I'm really curious to know like how things been since our last meeting.
Well, yeah, they did happen on my watch, but you know, Elizabeth doesn't really allow me to to discipline the kids, or I know I'm not their biological father, but I know what discipline is and how a family should be, and we're trying to be a family, but that's why we're here, and I'm willing to work on whatever it is that we're not seeing eye to eye on.
Yeah, it sounds like you are really invested in helping to facilitate change. But Elizabeth, I see that you were shaking your head, so I'm wondering, what were some of your thoughts about what's been going on?
I just feel like Brandon's concept of discipline, like with my kids, is like not something I am used to. I didn't grow up like that. Like that's just like not something I want in my house. So yeah, of course I'm not gonna let him discipline my kids.
Well, that's why the fire happened.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit more about like this discrepancy between the two of you?
I mean, I'll let Elizabeth tell you about it, because I don't want to be over talking.
Go on. You were so clear on the fact that like this all happened because like I don't let you discipline the kids.
Well, I mean, her youngest daughter, she was experimenting with some of her brother's chemistry, I think. And I was there. I was trying to tell her that, hey, don't do this like that. You might set the house on fire. And then, her older son, he's 12, I think. He's all gonna talk to my sister like that because he's heard her talk to me like that. So I just got frustrated and I stepped out. And then next thing I know, I turned around and the fire alarm was on and the whole house was on fire. And, am I to take blame for that? I'm not sure.
I mean, I just don't, there's been so many different like incidences where things have gone wrong when I'm at work and you're with the kids. And I'm just like, I don't know what to do anymore.
Can you all tell me a little bit about how these conversations go? So when you're having a disagreement about how to discipline the kids or how to care for them, can you tell me a little bit like how did these conversations go?
I'm trying to think of like the last time we got in a fight. I mean, what?
I mean, we were eating dinner one time. Remember that one?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Can we have that conversation again?
Yeah.
Her son, he's a very picky eater, and in my family, the way I grew up, I mean, we ate what was on the table and we didn't ask twice about it, right? So, he's a little picky, and I was just telling him, your mom made this, and I was sticking up for her, but apparently it backfired, and he just blew up on me, and I did not get really any support, and I was looked at like the outsider guy trying to, I know they're not my biological kids, but I want to be there for them,
Yeah. I mean, it was just kind of like my son didn't like what I had made for dinner. And he is picky. Brandon's right, he is picky, but we just have like two different styles of handling things. And Brandon went in and kind of was like, you don't ask questions, you eat what your mother makes you. And I kind of looked at Brandon and I said, I kind of just like looked at him like, no, we don't do that in my house. And I was like, Brandon, like, or I told my son, what else can I make you?
So it really sounds like for you, Brandon, you felt really unsupported and even disrespected in those moments. And for you, Elizabeth, it also seems as though it's really difficult for you to accept the support from Brandon when it comes to disciplining the kids. Does this type of conflict happen often between the two of you?
Yeah,
Ever since I moved in.
yeah, exactly. We didn't have these problems until Brandon moved in.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it sounds as though you all, you know, have been working really hard together to really enforce what you would consider to be like the rules of the household, but there's just that disconnect there where you all aren't seeing eye to eye. And, you know, for you, Elizabeth, being the mom of the children, I really wonder, like, what has influenced your inability to accept Brandon's support?
I think she's been single too long, and now she has a man, and she don't let her, you know, me do my thing, like be a man, you know.
I mean, I didn't grow like, I think we just grew up really differently. Like Brandon is, you know, he just grew up differently than I did. I didn't have a dad in my house. My mom kind of just did everything. And like, we just, you know, so I'm just not used to it. I don't know if I would say I'm not really willing to accept help. I mean, he watches the kids, which is when all these incidents happen. Like, I do need him to like help out.
But your kids were rascals before I came in the picture. Like, that has nothing to do with me. I'm trying to help. You're not trying to accept the help. And I'm like, you know, like, let me.
I don't agree with your help.
Oh, okay. Well, there it is.
Well, how are the children? What do they say about this?
Well, of course, they're going to listen to their mom.
Yeah, I'm very close with my kids, and they're not necessarily the happiest right now.
Okay. So the children seem to align more with you, Elizabeth, and Brandon, you're more so kind of outcasted. So it's really hard for you to kind of find your footing in this family.
Yeah, I'm the outsider, for sure.
You mentioned that you all have been together for about 8 months now.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you remind me about how long have you noticed these issues?
Ever since I moved in about 3 months ago.
Okay.
So that's when we started helping more with the kids. Before then, we kind of kept everything separate.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Prior to that, Elizabeth, what were your thoughts about Brandon entering the household, like coming to stay?
You know, I didn't think enough about it, maybe. I think we were just kind of like, it was, you know, the pandemic was still going on, and it was just, his lease was running out, and like we had been doing well. So it was like, it just felt like we kind of needed it. Like I needed help with the rent anyways. I could help. And, you know, Brandon was, you know, working too. And so it kind of just made sense. But I don't know if I ever, now that you say that, like, I don't think I've really I didn't probably think about it as much as I needed to. The kids haven't lived with another person other than my mom ever.
Okay. Have you ever had to share the responsibility of parenting?
Just with my mom, if anything, with their Nana.
Okay. What did that look like, if you don't mind sharing?
I mean, it was good. She just like really helped out when I needed her. Like, we didn't have I grew up with her, so she disciplines the kids the same way I do. Like I don't know, it feels like an extension of me. So there was never any issues with grandma.
Okay,
She
so
calls me now.
Go ahead, Brandon. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, I was saying she calls in from time to time, and they both make fun of me when they're on the phone with her, like on FaceTime.
They don't make fun of you.
They do though. It's all right.
My mom is a little concerned because of everything that's like happened, but we're not making fun of you, Brandon.
Okay. So again, I know that it's been a it's been difficult the past 3 months since you moved in, Brandon, as far as trying to kind of find your role as a parent in this household. And for you, Elizabeth, it's been difficult to kind of allow Brandon to find his position. So I know we've talked a little bit about how the kids feel, and it seems like they align well with you, Elizabeth, and you know, in the past have worked really closely with your mom with parenting the children. But now that, you know, your new boyfriend has come into the picture, I'm kind of wondering too, like, has there been a time when you all have been able to work together?
Like me and Brandon and the kids, or just me with the kids?
You, Brandon, and the children, yes.
I don't know, Brandon, what do you think?
I don't think you are trying enough. I mean, I'm trying, I'm doing my best, but I don't think they're giving in at all.
Brandon, do you mind elaborating a little bit more on what has trying really consisted of?
So, like, when I say something, let's say in the dinner time, that I said, you know, you have to eat the food that your mom made you. That was me trying to take a role and be, you know, an adult, and I'm not going to replace his dad, but I am, you know, her man, and as her man, I want to help her out in, you know, disciplining her kids. And it turned out that I was wrong, and that mom did not back me up, and so he listened to her, and that doubled that down. So now he doesn't listen to me at all.
Okay. Is that just with Tamar or Tamar?
I think the young one is getting the hunch that she can do the same. Because in the beginning, she was warmer, and now they're both like, you're not our.
Okay. I do have another quick question. I'm wondering too, like, what does discipline really look for both of you? So for you, Elizabeth, like, what does discipline look like, and how does that differ from what it looks like for you, Brandon?
Well, he's kind of the gets angry, like raises his voice, like timeout, like he's never like hit my kids, but I know that that's like, he's told me that that's kind of where he came from, right? Like, you know, his dad and all that kind of stuff. So, but that's like not at all how I work. Like, I'm very much like, I talk to them, I make sure I look them in their eye, I try to hear them out. If what they're saying is unreasonable, like we kind of try and collaborate on, you know, I give them space and time. You know, so like the food being picky, like I understand if he doesn't like his food, I don't want to force my child to do something that they don't want to do, right? And so that's why I conceded on the food thing and like was totally fine making him something else. Now, if we were in the grocery store and he's screaming, you know, like I don't agree with that. So, you know, maybe, you know, Brandon and I's discipline with style would maybe more align. In that case, I would have, you know, if my son did that, I'd be like, I'd probably actually just take him out to I'd stop whatever I was doing and take him out to the car until he calmed down. But I wouldn't like yell or scream, which that's kind of Brandon's style and not mine.
I mean, I don't yell per se. I just, you know, I'm very determined on discipline.
You yell. You raise your voice.
You're just very soft for them, and that's why they burned down the house.
Yeah, well, they're my children.
Well, okay.
Okay. So yes, I think that you all have kind of given me a lot of information as to, you know, what this looks like. And it sounds like it really comes down to, you know, stark differences in the way that you all discipline and your roles within this family. And so that's something that I want to talk a little bit more about as far as like the roles and the structure of your family, and kind of like what needs to change in order for things to progress and get better.
All right, appreciate it. Hi, Elizabeth. Nice to see you both again.
So now
Hi.
we've switched around.
Brendan, how are you?
So Juliana is a therapist now.
I'm all right. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Thank you. How was this week for you guys? Leaving session, did that bring up anything? Or last time that we spoke, there were some tensions that we spoke about. However, I wanted to check in and see if how things are going and how everyone is doing in the family. How is Tamar doing, and how's Mendy doing, and you, Elizabeth? Of course, Brandon, you as well.
I mean, it brought up something because Brandon isn't even speaking to me anymore at this point, barely.
Oh, is that right? What's going on, Brandon?
You know, last time she just kind of said, hey, these are my kids. And I just feel like I have no space here as a parent. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not doing anything right. So I've just decided I don't think I need to do anything at all. My role isn't appreciated.
I understand.
So I've taken a step back.
Mm-hmm. It's a very difficult position, the one that you are in, Brendan, and I applaud you for stepping in and even wanting to take a parenting role to children that are not biologically yours. I commend that highly, and I think it is pretty noble of you to do so. Maybe we can negotiate a different method, but your will is there, and the will to help, can give us a lot of hope in that. And I don't know, how do you feel about that, Elizabeth?
I feel like he's being a big baby at this point. Like, I never said that he wasn't appreciated. I just raised my concern about the way we are different with our discipline. And like, yeah, they are my kids, but you live in the house, you and I are in a relationship. We sleep in the same bed every night. So I'm not saying I don't appreciate you like stepping in and like helping me with the kids.
And the actions speak louder than words. Like again, they're your kids. You mentioned that last time. Pretty much you don't respect my parenting. You don't think that I'm capable of parenting the children.
You both have a pretty difficult position in this family that we are discussing. Both of you have a very important role, and both of you need one another. However, because of the ways of the parenting styles being a little different, like Elizabeth, your approach is soft, and that's really sweet. That like you mentioned the other time, you don't want to force your kids to eat something that they don't like, and I agree with that. You shouldn't. But in the meantime, sometimes when, for instance, the incident with the fire happens, maybe when there is a little bit more of a authoritative figure in the home, like Brendan was coming in and advising the kids that, hey, this shouldn't be done in this way because there are, dangers associated with it. Maybe if Brendan had a bigger say in this relationship, and the kids were respecting his authority a little bit more, maybe that could avoid some incidents that have occurred in the home. And also your relationship, where is that? How is romance between you guys? Has it been affected by it?
I mean, we haven't had sex in weeks, so.
I mean, I really don't feel respected, and at this point, I just don't know what to do anymore but to take a complete step back. Like, I don't even know if I'm wanted in this family. I don't feel part of this family.
Do you want to be wanted in this family?
I do. I do want to be part of the family. and I want my voice to be heard, and I want people to take me seriously. But I just feel like I'm not getting that.
Elizabeth, do you want Brendan to be part of this family and to be wanted in this family, not only by you, but by your kids as well?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think, I mean, I love Brandon. I want him in my life. I just, I don't know, as you say that, I kind of feel like, and we touched on it last week, that the only other person that my kids have lived with is my grandmother, or is their nana, is their grandmother. And so this is new for us, and maybe I didn't think things through enough. But I'm not saying that like I don't want him in the family. I feel like he doesn't understand. He's not willing to like meet me where I'm at with like the way that I discipline my kids. Maybe I'm not supporting him because he's not supporting me.
And go ahead, Brent.
I'm sorry, I disagree. I feel as though, again, I'm coming into this family. I don't have a choice but to, kind of side with you.
Family. That was your choice.
So, so what if I suggested something? What if we actually laid down some beliefs that we have about what parenting should look like to you, Elizabeth, and to you, Brendan, and then maybe finding a middle way for both kids to actually have more of a balanced way of being parented, and maybe we can invite them in session next time. But before, we have to kind of go through just whatever worldview that you have, Elizabeth, about parenting and how it should be done, and you, Brendan, and how should parenting be done according to you. And you both have very valid points, and it seems like you both want to make this work, and you want your relationship to also flourish, and it's kind of getting in the way of that. And so with that, would you be open to bringing maybe the kids in so that we can kind of see part of the behaviors that the kids are displaying with Brendan, and then maybe just tapping into a little more how the disciplining styles should be according to both of you, but satisfying both of your worldviews. And maybe we can explore your worldviews and see, whichever one stands higher chances of being the one that is accepted by the entire family as a unit. Brendan, Elizabeth, Tamar, and Mendy. What do you both think about that?
We can bring the kids in. I mean, that's not the problem. I still feel like there's a lot still to be figured out between Brandon and I at this point. I mean, we're not even speaking in the house, or like it's very like, it feels like we just feel like roommates.
When did you start not speaking to one another?
Last week after session.
Oh, right after session.
Kind of. He kind of just shut down.
Brendan, can I ask you what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of mentioned earlier, like I just feel as though she wants things her way, and I'm not really included. My opinions and perspectives are not respected. And like, what is my purpose? What's my purpose? I don't know my purpose, so I've just kind of taken a complete step back.
When you first moved into the home, how was your first time coming in? How was your welcoming party per se? Was there one?
Well, honestly, after last session, I kind of, after Elizabeth kind of mentioned, it was the pandemic and we just kind of moved in. It felt like the right thing to do. I'm starting to feel like me moving in was more out of convenience.
For who?
For Elizabeth.
Is that correct? Be correct?
Don't even come at me like that. You know damn well that you wanted to move in. Like it was convenient for both of us. We talked about this. Like your lease was up. I had space. Like it was like both of us.
What kind of?
There's no winning here. Like it was out of convenience for her. I mean, if you think about it, I'm looking into the picture. My role isn't being respected as a step parent. The kids don't listen to me. I can't discipline. I really have no say. So really, who is it benefiting? And not me. I'm just helping to pay part of the bills. So it's just not. It's convenient for her.
I've let.
Brendan.
Oh my God.
Brendan and Elizabeth, both of you guys. How did you guys meet? How did you, it's been a fresh relationship, only 8 months, right? So when did your interests collide towards one another?
I don't know. Just out of convenience.
Was it out of convenience? Was it pandemic love? What was it?
At this point, I don't want to say anything. I'm going to be shunned for anything I say to you. So I don't have anything to say.
I understand both of your positions are really delicate. And I wanted to ask you, you guys feel like you need each other?
I think that it's beneficial if we work together, yes.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Elizabeth?
I don't know anymore. It just makes him feel like I start to feel like he thinks I'm some kind of like opportunist or something, that I care about him. I mean, I've introduced my family to him. My children are my everything. And I have opened that up to him. Like, it seems like as if he thinks I've done nothing. And I've made his life like a living hell, and I don't have his back. But I've never introduced my kids to anyone that I've been seeing. Ever.
She's saying that you are very important to her, Brendan, and that you are very needed in the family, and that the reason that you both are here, it means that you both want to work on whatever it is that you are not communicating clearly towards each other.
Well, I just wish that it was shown through action. I mean, yeah, she's saying it, but again, when it comes time for me to really be present in the house, I don't get that. So, I mean, it's nice to hear her say it, but when I want to see it.
Mm-hmm. It takes a lot for a mother to bring her children to therapy as well. She's willing to do that. Is that hopeful for you?
I mean, that she's trying.
She's definitely trying.
I mean, you're the one that's not speaking to me in the house.
What can I say? What can I say? Everything gets shot down. No one listens to me anyway.
Well,
the victim.
After knowing that she's willing to actually do pretty giant steps, she opened her home, she opened her family to welcoming you in, and here you are in therapy, and she will bring her kids in. So it seems like it's very important to her to have you feel important and to also work out whatever differences that there might be. I think I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful that there will be a common ground that we can find.
We'll see. We'll see.
We will see. We'll see, and I'll see you guys with your kids next week.
Hi. Oh God. Okay. Well, now we're switching over. Who is this? Okay. Hi. Well, welcome back. How are you guys doing? Doing all right.
Doing all right. All right.
I know that last time we kind of left off, I know that you had text me and said that the kids weren't going to be able to make this session, which is understandable. And I know there was a little bit of tension. I feel like, you know, some of our sessions aren't always going to be wrapped with a pretty bow. So how is it going home after the session last week?
You know, I really appreciated your help with like showing how much we both really want to be in this and how much we're both sacrificing. So I felt pretty good. I felt like things are on a good path after that session.
Yeah, Brandon, I feel like you had kind of retreated a little bit in the last couple of sessions. How are you feeling right now?
I did, and you know, I saw like how harsh I was even being towards myself, not believing that, you know, she probably does mean well, and I think she does. And you know, I wanted to also say that, you know, we're talking, we're in a different position where, you know, I feel like I belong in a way, but we're still like, the kids are still, I mean, I don't want to talk about her kids, all that hurts. Yeah.
Well, and I want to touch on some stuff because I was thinking about our last session, and, you know, Elizabeth, you had brought up something big, which is that like over the past couple of sessions, you've made some big statements about how the kids haven't lived with anybody before other than your mother, or that that you've never introduced the kids to someone before, right? And so I can, you know, this happens a lot with families and couples, especially like blended families and this kind of dynamic where there's not like a rule book on how to do things, right? And so you had kind of mentioned before too that you might not have given some of the thought that you wanted to something like this and integrating Brandon into your family. And so like, yeah, you know, and we've talked about the differences in disciplinary styles. You know, Elizabeth, I'm wondering, have you ever really told Brandon how you would like him to, you know, parent your children, or what you think Brandon and your family looks like in terms of parenting?
You know, now that I think about it, I don't believe I came right out and told him, you know, what my expectations are. I think a lot of our conversations have been about the differences. Like, this is how I parent, this is how I prefer to parent, and that's how you prefer to parent. But I don't think I've ever like come out and said, this is an expectation of mine, this is what I want to see. So to answer your question, no.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a common comment.
Sorry?
I said that's pretty common, that those things don't necessarily get communicated. It's almost like assumed, or, you know, we don't take the time to think about those dynamics. What were you going to say, Brandon?
Well, I was going to say that Mandy came home one day and, you know, I was telling her to do the homework, you know, and from school, because school started, and her friend came at the door, knocked, and, you know, wanted Mandy to go outside and play with him. And I was like, you know, she doesn't want to come play with you because she's doing her homework. But then, you know, Liz was like, no, let her go outside and play, and, you know, she'll come back. And, you know, so like, of course she'll do what Elizabeth says, but
I see kind of and what you talked about, that dinner incident too, where you're trying to take a stance, but you're not feeling really supported by Elizabeth. And it's kind of a clear understanding of how you guys differ. So actually, I want to take that moment. So Elizabeth, do you remember that incident that Brandon's talking about with the homework?
I do remember vaguely kind of what happened a little bit, yeah.
Can you actually both of you replay that? And maybe Elizabeth, like, this is a perfect example of like, how would you want Brandon to then handle that situation? How would you have rather handle that situation? Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, so what I remember is she came home and she, you know, had some homework, but a friend came and asked if she could play. And, to me, I'm okay. They don't have to come home and do their homework right away, just as long as it gets done. So I'm a little bit more flexible in that sense, where I was okay with her going out and playing. And Brandon, he wasn't really feeling that at all, and he wanted her to do her homework first.
Right. So I'm gonna kind of interject real quick. You are the captain of this ship. You are their mother, right? So tell me and tell Brandon how you would have wanted Brandon to handle that situation. So if you were okay with Mandy going out and playing, that's what you would have. So now would you say the new rule would be that after school the kids have a choice, or that they're allowed to play and they don't immediately have to do their homework? Is that something that you agree with?
Absolutely. As long as it gets done, I think I would expect Brandon to consult with me first and just double check, like, is it okay for, the kids to go outside prior to doing homework before just saying no.
Okay. So asking you first sounds like the best thing that you would want Brandon to do in a scenario like that, or maybe all scenarios with the kids?
Yeah, consulting with me if possible is best. But if it's a situation where I'm not available to consult, I would want him to allow them to kind of as long as the things that are being asked of them gets done, to let them go ahead and have their fun and have their free time, as long as what we're asking ultimately gets done.
Okay. Brandon, how does that feel for you to have a little bit of direction on that?
I mean, it makes me feel like another kid. I am trying to also build a family with Elizabeth, and I'm wondering, do I have to ask her when I have a kid with her? Do I have to ask her also again? I mean, is it because they're not my kids, or what is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just respectable for you to ask me as their mother.
Yeah.
If they were your biological kids, I do think that you would have a little bit more say so, but they're not. So I expect you to consult with me first.
And I hear you, Brandon, on that aspect of feeling like you have to ask permission. But I think it sounds like, especially for Elizabeth, that it's important to feel like you're respecting her role as their mother. And who's to say that we don't talk about these rules later on, right, down the road? Remember, this is still kind of new. You guys have only been living together for 3 months, right? And we're kind of trying to reestablish kind of the boundaries, right, of where you guys are at with the kids. And so it sounds like, I know this is not one instance, but maybe kind of that rule of, one, ask Elizabeth if it's pertaining to the kids. 2, if Elizabeth is not available, to kind of allow the kids to have some flexibility. But I also want to point out too, because I feel like, Brandon, you've mentioned kind of you come from a disciplinary, very strict household. And it sounds like, and I could be wrong, that you want to make sure that the homework is getting done. And it sounds like, Elizabeth, you want the homework to get done too. So my question is, what happens if, Elizabeth or Brandon allows Mandy to go out and play, but the homework doesn't get done, right? Because now we're coming down to discipline, right? Where you guys have both very much have differed. And so it sounds like Brandon wants to support you as a mother, right? There's that whole thing with the food incident. There's that support, but how do we get you guys aligned? So what were to happen if the homework, or what's your deadline for the homework to get done so that Brandon can establish your guys' goal of getting the homework done? Is it by 9? Is it by bedtime? What does that boundary look like?
There is no boundary.
I would say before bedtime is really my expectation.
Okay, before bedtime. And I kind of want to bring Brandon in on this because Mom says bedtime. Brandon, does that, I know this isn't maybe your style, but can you understand that, as long as the homework gets done by bedtime is something you can kind of understand?
Yeah, but it doesn't get done. And so as a care partner, I want to make sure that it does get done because the kids do lie to her a lot.
Okay, so let's let's start real quick first with just establishing that rule, right? Mama Bear here, Elizabeth is saying these are the rules that she wants. You can say, yeah, Mandy, you can totally go play. Just make sure that, like mom said, or like we said, homework needs to be done by 9 p.m. Right? And that be just the initiation of this new rule, right? And let's see how that plays out, right? And then we can get a little bit more into, whether or not they're finishing their homework, right? And whether or not, but it sounds like any decision, whether it's disciplinary or not, Elizabeth wants to have the first say so on what's done.
That's right.
Yeah, I would agree. I just think that that's the respectable thing to do.
Yeah.
Run it by me first.
Yeah. And, I want to bring attention to, this is probably different for Brandon. It seems like this is going to be different from how he grew up. And so kind of just making sure that there's some compassion for both of you in these new roles that you're doing, right? Elizabeth, this is new for you, having somebody in the house with the kids, and Brandon, this is new for you, right?
Very new.
Yeah. And so kind of just sometimes we're so hard on each other and we want things to work out so bad that like we just jump into things. And with that said, I do want to take some time because from what we've talked about in the past, it feels like I'm not hearing a lot about you, Elizabeth and Brandon, and your couple relationship. It sounds like this kind of him moving in has really just taken over the parental system for you guys, and we need to negotiate that, absolutely, and that's what we're doing. But I do want to spend some time about like you guys as a couple. Like, you mentioned last week that you guys really haven't had sex. Like how, tell me about you guys as a couple.
I think we're better now. We're better in that aspect, but I still feel that when I do follow, let's say that I follow, Elizabeth's style, the kids still look at me like I'm not to be respected or, heard or,
Yeah. Well, I'm also wondering too, right? We have to let things play out. And it sounds like if you were to follow what Elizabeth wants you to do, they will see that as you respecting their mother's rules and roles in the family, right? And so that actually may help, right? So we can't predict what they're going to do. As much as we think we know, kids actually can really surprise us sometimes. And so I'd really try and maybe give that a little bit of a try when you guys, until we see each other next, to see maybe you might get some different reactions from the kids.
Well, we haven't had fires. That's good.
We haven't had any fires. And so it takes time for the kids too, right? This is the first time. So they've got their own walls up too.
And I think too, like if we can get that under control, that the relationship would be a little bit better because there'll be less conflict.
Yeah. And like even just in times of like style, right? We talked about kind of Brandon, you kind of shut down, and Elizabeth, you kind of get frustrated. Like how do you, like before you had moved in, was that your communication style when you would get in arguments?
No, there was less arguments before moving in.
Yeah.
And do you guys get any alone time? Because I imagine going from just being a couple to then all of a sudden being kind of parent. I mean, like Elizabeth, you've always been a parent, but like for Brandon, do you guys maintain like date night? Do you guys maintain like time alone for you two?
No, that's out the window.
Yeah, it's a lot less now that we live together. We see each other all the time, so we don't really go out that much.
Yeah,
we're busy with just day-to-day stuff.
Maybe we should.
Yeah, I'm open to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the coming weeks too, I really want us to separate kind of those dynamics, right? There's Elizabeth as a mother and Brandon as this kind of new parental figure, and we're trying to figure out where you are going to be in this role, how you can support Elizabeth, but also, carving out your own space with the children but that doesn't mean that there's also like the Brandon and Elizabeth that just started dating 8 months ago and who you guys are as just a couple, and kind of trying to maintain that space for you as well, because it seems like, you know, Elizabeth, you may have had experience of navigating both, right? Because you always were a mom all these years, and you were dating Brandon. But for Brandon, you know, I wonder too if there's a little bit of adjustment there, right? Of being a couple with you, and then all of a sudden not really having that couple time, but really kind of pushed into the parental stage. And so I think, you know, for next week, maybe that's just something for you guys to kind of think about, but something that we can address going forward. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Absolutely, I'm in agreement with that.
Okay. All right. Well, sounds good. And I will see you guys next week, hopefully with the kids.
Ask Elizabeth.
We'll try.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you. So let's go ahead and take a break. Are we okay taking like a 5-minute break? So it gives us a solid 30 minutes to talk about this role play. So still trying to kind of navigate time here. So if it's okay with all of you, let's come back together at 4:30 so we can have some debriefing time with all of this. All right, everybody, little quick 5-minute break here. So I'm thinking in the moment about like, do I want to structure this or do I want to kind of have it open? So, we're learning as we're going, we're adjusting to this format. So how about I'll go unstructured with it and just say, comments, questions, feedback for Juliana, Brianna, and Caitlin.
It was a wonderful presentation. I absolutely love the role play. First of all, I thought the beginning was like the highlight, but then the role play really brought it to life. And I appreciated the different dynamics that each presenter showed, as a therapist and also the participant or receiving the therapy. So brilliant job, all of you. And I really felt even more understanding of the concepts, actually seeing it in action. So you've all done a very wonderful job in doing so.
Yeah, I certainly agree, and I think very good portrayals. I've sat in the room with these people, and I thought you really brought it to life and approached it in a way that I was not expecting. It was much gentler and more gradual. Oh, and I thought it was brilliant the way you changed characters by treating it as a different session. That was terrific. Well done.
Yeah, I want to just say, I think you guys did a wonderful job. I cannot imagine. I mean, it's hard to apply these things as we're learning them and to adequately showcase them in a role play. It's just so difficult. And so I think you guys did a very good job. Yeah, now I'm nervous, but you guys did an awesome job. I hope I'm half as good as you guys.
I agree. I think you guys did so good. And I learned a lot from each one of you as you portrayed the therapist and as you portrayed the couple. So I definitely took notes on different approaches, how to be subtle, but how to be very direct with some of the conflict that they were having. So I really learned a lot.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the role play and how you highlighted the conflict that exists within the parental and spouse subsystems. And then at the end, again, reiterated the importance of the spouse system on top of the parental system and kind of trying to understand or restructure. I did have a question for you guys. Since this was not a nuclear family, and given the time frame that Brandon was moving into this new system, how did you three navigate kind of how to set up or understand the hierarchy within this family? And what did you even plan, like how they would work as a parental subsystem because this relationship was so new?
Go ahead, Brianna.
Yeah, well, I think that we used a vignette and we kind of built off that. So like, if you can repeat the last part of your question again, so I can make sure I answer it.
Yeah, of course. I was just wondering, because of the dynamic of a parental subsystem was so new in terms of, like, obviously Elizabeth was very used to being kind of the head of the hierarchy, and incorporating Brandon was a little difficult. So how were you guys as therapists or even clients able to navigate how the hierarchy of this family worked, and what direction were you moving in?
Yeah, I think that just kind of like, again, in those initial meetings, which we didn't know, like, I think our plan was to kind of come in, kind of already sit, but like really gathering the information in the beginning would be helpful. Just kind of exploring like how we got to this point, what do things look like so far? And I think we did kind of show that in our sessions, like how did this really come to be? And to get to where we were trying to go, I think it was really trying to figure out like, okay, so where's the conflict and what makes sense for this this family structure? Like, what is your goal here? What would alleviate some of the conflict that you're seeing?
Also, I will piggyback on your reply, Brianna, if you don't mind. Also, structural is really big on feedback. And so giving that the willingness of Brian was intense to take this role. It seemed like Brian really wanted this role. And so when the question was asked if both parents want this role, that solidified that this may be a new relationship, but they're so willing that we can work with it and we can treat it as something that can be more long-term if the couple is willing to, be participating in therapy, which they were very willing. And Brian's position on that, giving, that he was switching roles and adjusting to that new role and giving us the feedback that, okay, I don't like this, but then seeing the relationship from different angles, that's what we were trying to get, as much feedback from the repositionings as possible so that we could actually progress forward with whatever changes that needed to be made. Does that answer it?
Any questions for Juliana, Brianna, and Caitlin in terms of like decision making, how they incorporated structural, how they were conceptualizing the case, anything like that?
Hey, I want to double check. What was it that you said about when it came to recording on Zoom to make sure the settings are at what again?
Not on like speaker view. I think it needs to be on like gallery view.
When you start recording?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Thank
Really,
you.
I thought it looked great to be cutting between each of you. I don't think that was bad at all. It was like a TV show.
Well, it helps to see some of the nonverbals, some of the responses to things. So particularly with, if you're getting client feedback in a bunch of different ways, we give the most of, we express ourselves mostly through nonverbal. So it allows to see, what the therapist may be attending to in real time. So if I am in there and I roll my eyes, that you can see what prompted a therapist to respond to something. So it's really just getting that holistic view of the session.
I have I have one more question. I'm interested in knowing whether the three of you, when conceptualizing the role play or the execution of the role play, whether you guys had any disagreements or an alternative way of conceptualizing the case. And I'd just be interested how you managed to work through that or how your views may have differed.
We actually were gonna go with we were gonna take the vignette and do the grandmother and the mom. But I think we ended up siding with a couple because we could get kind of some conflict, some enactment more, a little bit more stuff going on. We wanted to be able to clearly define some of the interventions. And then I think the only thing that we were trying to figure out was where best or how best to unbalance, because a lot of the times with unbalancing, it's meant to, like, in the Williams article, it was about, like, siding with the mother to empower them. But in this scenario, Brandon also has a level that he's struggling with too. And so I think that's kind of where we just did a lot of the most discussing on how we were going to be able to do that, support both of them and unbalance both of them in a way.
I just,
go ahead.
Sorry, just logistically, when you guys were getting ready to do this, did you decide ahead of time, like, okay, these are the interventions that I want to bring in, and how difficult was it to bring them in a role play where it's not scripted and you don't quite know what the person is going to say next. Because I imagine that that's very difficult to do. And, and then you have the added pressure of, you're recording it, people are going to watch it. I could just imagine that this is a very difficult assignment.
Yeah, we rolled with the punches, whatever came. Even some fights were like last minute improvisations, and that's what I was actually going to say, is that sometimes being mindful to use the intervention loses the flow of what is going on, and maybe some things may not be caught on accurate timing because of the mindfulness of, let me make sure that this intervention is coming through correctly. So I appreciate you recognizing that.
Which I guess just comes with experience, right? The more you have the experience of working in a certain theory, the easier those shifts come, right? But in this phase, I'm sure it feels very difficult to get it all in. I don't know.
Did you find, as you were going through this, that you became more comfortable with doing structural family therapy? Did you start off like, yeah, I want to do this for the rest of my life, or no, this is not for me? How did that shift, if at all?
Well, I think for me, it was like developing a deeper understanding of what structural family therapy is. And so through the role play of actually applying it, it just kind of solidified my understanding of it a little more.
I would also say that, when that friend calls you and something goes wrong and you're automatically on uplifting mode, and it's like, no, girl, you're going to be all right. And so something like that is natural in a way, to kind of just make the person that is feeling inferior have a voice and have a say. And so that's what it reinforced for me. It reinforced for me to be able to maybe give a compliment without thinking, am I doing something wrong by giving a compliment, or am I shifting gears too fast by allowing this positivity to be in the room, and is it appropriate or not? And so it kind of comforted me in that sense, that it is okay to bring the voice front and central.
Any other feedback or questions?
I just want to say you guys did an excellent job, and for going first, I could thank you guys for going first and kind of being our models and giving us tips. So thank you so much.
I'd like to add to that. I think that the formatting was really, it was very well balanced and varied, so that there was that portion where you're kind of sitting and really learning, like in terms of hearing a lecture piece of it, and then showing what like a master therapist would have done, and then you guys trying that on. And so I feel like that helped with continuing to reinforce the learning and the concepts. And I like the way that it was, the way you guys structured that. And I guess you saw my comments hopefully in the chat as the video was going along. That's like easiest for me to give like live feedback. It wasn't too distracting, but I really thought there were some really cool ways that you just in your own style, in your own way, tried to apply structural. I think my favorite part of learning in this doctoral program is watching you all in your style and your work. And so it's wonderful learning from you, and thanks for that.
Caitlin, I do have a question for you. I couldn't help but notice some reactivity in you while watching yourself in the role of the therapist. And if, not necessarily to put you on the spot, but if you feel comfortable sharing maybe what was going on with you as you were watching yourself in that therapist role.
I feel like I've just talked a lot today. And so I feel like I've come off really strong. And then I feel like I did. I mean, we definitely in that position for the role play where they were at, I took a lot more directives and I was like really in there and giving a lot of, boundary negotiation and new rules and stuff. And so yesterday doing it, it felt okay. But I think just coming off today where I presented earlier in another class and then doing the presentation, and then I just feel like it was just a lot of my voice, and I have a lot of anxiety about it. And so I think everybody can agree it's really hard to watch yourself do therapy all the time. You're like, I would have done this. I would have not gone that direction. I would have asked about this more, or I feel like I'm lecturing my clients. So there's just all of that that's happening. I think it's just compounded with the fact that I also presented earlier today in another class. So it's just a lot for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing, Caitlin. I was just curious if I did guess that you were probably being critical of yourself, and that, I mean, as evidenced by things like this.
Literally hiding my face, and I couldn't say anything because I wasn't on mute. So I literally had to just be quiet in my like internal like cringing of hearing me talk. So.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. Any other feedback, thoughts, constructive feedback, anything like that? I'm gonna, open to that. Because I know sometimes we tend to be like very nicey nice with each other, but there's equally the opportunity to, question some things and give constructive feedback. And I really want to foster that and have some safety in that, knowing that, it's a big part of what we do in this field. And to not be afraid to ask questions, to challenge some things.
Professor, I just had a quick question, and even to the group that just presented as far as details go, the role plays, that was 45 minutes. I think, Kate, you said it was like 45 minutes on the dot. And then when it came to the first half, the presentation portion, whether it's PowerPoint, a video, something incorporated, that is 30 minutes in itself, right?
Right.
Okay.
30 minutes. Yep. You, this first group did great. You were at like 28 minutes and 58 seconds or something like that. So great work.
Thank you. I just wanted to double check on that one.
Yeah, of course.
I have a question for you guys. Were there points while you were playing in the role of the therapist where you kind of questioned yourself and said, how is this any different from, any other therapy? How can I know right now that I'm kind of leaning towards structural? Do you ever think about that or ask that kind of question? Because I know I think of those kinds of questions when I'm, trying to practice and be intentional about a certain model that I'm going to be using, because there's so many things that kind of overlap, and the ways that the terminology is just maybe used sort of a little bit differently in one. So I guess for me, I'm wondering how were you able to be mindful of that?
Yeah, for me, I think some things kind of just like you said, overlap and kind of blend in. So I think for me, what was really important was trying to think of what are the interventions and be really specific on at least playing that out, because you do see some overlap across different approaches and theories. So I think, yeah, for me, it was just specific on the intervention that I'm using.
For yourselves, did you each kind of, as you approach this, say, hey, I want to practice trying on this intervention and this intervention when it's my turn? And if so, did you feel like you did a great job at doing that? Did it feel sort of unclear or still kind of edgy to you?
That was the part that we actually kind of wanted to be mindful of, so that each 15-minute that we were being the therapist, we were at least showing one or two interventions that were possibly clear. The one thing that probably I would notice is that there is a little bit of freedom when it comes to the language that probably structural can use, because you can definitely use the client's language, but you can use that in many different approaches. But when asking questions, it can resemble reflecting, because sometimes we do repeat, hey, did you say what I thought you said? Or, it could be something like that. And I am also very curious if, let's say we saw a session, it was strictly one type of theory. Would the viewer, being a therapist, pinpoint what type of interventions these were and what type of therapy was used? You know, it's some blurred lines for sure.
What were the techniques that each of you were showcasing?
That's what I was gonna ask.
I used enactment and mapping, were the specific focuses on my role play.
And mine was basically unbalancing and joining in and accommodating. I wanted to make sure that both parents were important and were in taking roles that were positioned properly in the hierarchy of the family, so that everyone was being heard, because that was the issue, that Brian was not having so much of a say. So for me was unbalancing, making sure that that came across, and I hope it did. I'm not sure.
And then I was just focusing on like giving directives and taking kind of that approach. Maybe kind of getting somewhat of an enactment there with trying to replay how she would have wanted that after school incident to go. But yeah, mostly just like directives and boundary and rule, like negotiation.
Anything else in terms of questions, feedback? So how about this, in the spirit of maybe starting the process to happen in subsequent classes, I'll give each one of you some constructive feedback or just some things to think about. Okay, so I'll go chronologically in how each of you were a therapist. So Brianna, one thing that I was thinking when you were talking, you had asked the question, like, what do you think needs to change in your relationship, in your parenting relationship? And one of the questions that you can kind of complement that with, or you can continue that question with, is what's working. So remembering that you're getting this snapshot of this couple, this family that's in adjustment. So this relationship is new, this living under the same roof is new. So we run the risk sometimes when we are always looking at, okay, what can change? What are things that need to be different? That the underlying message can be that there's nothing really that's working. So we want to balance those two realities, that yes, there are things that we would like to change, also in that spirit of instilling hope and really looking at this as kind of this stuck point of what's been working well. What are some things that you have negotiated? What are things within the roles that you would like to keep the same? So to instill some of that ability to have some agency and to feel like there are some things that we do have to build upon. So that would be the one piece of feedback that I'd have for you, Brianna. For you, Juliana, one of the things to really keep in mind as you were talking about this unbalancing, the technique of unbalancing, and recognizing that one of the things that we talked about last week of as we move toward, metaphorically, our family members, that when we move toward one, we are bringing all of the power that we have in our position as a therapist. So one of the things to keep in mind, one of the comments that you had made, Juliana, was I think it was with the homework. I'm so sorry. It was like whatever scenario you guys were talking through, you said, I agree with you on that, Elizabeth. Like, I agree with your position, your approach to this, that you have to be aware of the weight that brings, because potentially the subtext of that is, Brandon, you're doing this wrong. I disagree with you. Therefore, we must privilege the appropriate approach, which is what I agree with Elizabeth. So remembering that to be aware of the power that you have and to be quite neutral in the way that you are responding to those. So how is that working for you? Tell me a little bit about the dynamic, because one, I would argue it doesn't really matter what you agree with because you're not in that system. They have to go home and negotiate that. So leaving space for them to talk about that. So that's the one piece that I have for you. And then Caitlin, one of the things that, you know, you were working on was bringing out the romantic subsystem, that couple subsystem, right? And kind of trying to understand how that functions differently from the executive subsystem. So I liked where you got to with it. One of the things that I was just thinking about, and I would love to get some feedback from the class too, is, you know, the idea of this hierarchy within that executive subsystem. So the way that I heard the three of you was that, you know, Mom, Elizabeth, should have final say, and Brandon should, and again, challenge me in this if I'm reading this incorrectly, and Brandon should kind of default to Elizabeth. And that's essentially the dynamic that was, okay, so Caitlin, are you disagreeing with my read on this?
No, I'm just, go ahead. You
Okay. Sorry, I'm like really watching the three of you. So one of the things that I was curious about was, you know, with that, the intervention of, okay, Elizabeth, what would you like, how would you have liked this homework conversation to have gone differently? How would you have liked Brandon to interact with Tamar? I think that was, I'm assuming, I don't know, the child in a different way. And what I would want, what I would encourage you to also do is give Brandon that same question. Because again, what I would argue is the subtext in that is reinforcing some of this imbalance. Because I wasn't convinced that this hierarchy within the parental subsystem was working for them. So to encourage this default to Elizabeth, I'm wondering how that was actually being received by Brandon. Because he was coming in saying over and over, I just don't feel respected. My ability or my, you know, the permission that I have to parent in a way that makes sense to me, I don't get support in that, and I'm really undermined essentially. And then the intervention of, okay, so what I'm hearing you say, Elizabeth, is you would like for Brandon to check in with you about this. So I was just curious about the potential of reinforcing the issue that the couple came in with. So please feel free to respond to that, because that's my perception, and just that doesn't mean it's the perception.
I think I feel like in the parental subsystem, it might have been the consensus that Brandon needed to concede a little bit just because of the dynamics, but that's, I think, why there was the effort for us to move a little bit into a place of honoring the couple subsystem. So that would be more of where Brandon and Elizabeth would equal, where Elizabeth would come down and they can find their power together. Okay. So that foundation can help them in the parental role, where she starts to value his role in the relationship in general, because first and foremost, they were a couple. It wasn't like they became parents at the same time. Brandon's just now coming into this. And so to empower him within the couple so that that can translate over into the parental. I think that's ideally where I would have wanted to take that, so that he does have power and he does have agency, and that his view on things is heard and collaborated with Elizabeth. But to get Elizabeth to be able to be more open, she needs to be able maybe to find that foundation with him again, or just reiterate what that foundation is for them.
Yeah, I thank you for that, Caitlin. And I think this goes back to something that Jocelyn, you had put in the chat. One thing, it was earlier during the presentation where you had said, you know, I may be quite explicit about the structural techniques that I'm using. And Caitlin, I think that was beautiful. I think that's something that you could actually explicitly incorporate into the conversation. of, there are these two subsystems that you are simultaneously a part of. And one may function well like this, and one may function well like this. So I really thank you for responding to that. And I appreciate the navigating in two very different ways, these two subsystems, and giving credence to their simultaneous existence and how they can each, how the hierarchy within each of them can be different while still maintaining some respect and allowing for perspectives to be honored.
One thing that I think Caitlin did really well too is that she kind of reminded them that it can be flexible. Like this is not a permanent situation necessarily, right? And it's sort of like respecting where they are developmentally, even as a couple, and as a family that is just all joined and mixed together. And so I really liked that particular, I guess, technique that Caitlin added there to talk about, sort of remind them of the impermanence of that situation, how it can change and be flexible.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Juliana, Brianna, Caitlin, thank you so much for starting us off so strongly. Next week, you all get to hear my voice a bunch, and then we'll have some co-teaching in a couple of weeks. So thank you so much, everybody, for engaging. Thank you for giving feedback. Please don't be afraid to give each other some constructive feedback and to question some things. It's one of the ways that we learn. So have a great rest of your week, and I will see you all next Tuesday.
Thank you.